You say you trust God, but do you really? When we're going through a tough time, we often hear people say, oh, just trust God, put it in His hands. And sometimes it's like, okay, but how? Today we're talking about what it actually looks like to trust in God. Before we get into that, if you're new here, I'm Kayla, and I make videos about faith and lifestyle. And if you're not, hey. Okay, so first off, I want to talk about the difference between trusting in man and trusting in God. As humans, we are extremely fickle. I need to Google what that word means because I'm pretty sure I used it in the right context, but I just want to make sure that I'm not just using random words. Fickle means likely to change, especially due to caprice, irresolution, or instability, casually changeable. Yes, so humans are fickle. Our emotions are up and down. It's a roller coaster every single day. So we could say we're doing one thing and then end up doing something completely different. I realized that when you put your trust in something that is bound to change, you're going to get hurt. Like, you kind of have to expect it. But on the other hand, when we talk about trusting in God is one of the best things we can ever do. God is not a man that he should lie, nor the son of man that he should change his mind. As other versions say that he should repent. And God is faithful. I was doing Bible study yesterday. It was talking about how God's mercies are new every morning and great is his faithfulness. And as per my Bible study method, I'm questioning everything, questioning the word choice. And I asked, why? What does it mean to be faithful? And to be faithful essentially means that your character does not change. So we know that God, being faithful, means his character doesn't change. He isn't prone to those roller coaster emotions that we are. And so yes, he does feel, but it doesn't change his character. He never goes back on his word. That is the kind of person that we should be wanting to place our trust in, right? We should want to place our trust in something that doesn't change, someone that we know will be the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And that just reminded me of Psalm 20, verse 7, that says, "Some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God." All right, so we're going to talk about 5 practical ways we can actually trust God and what that looks like. So the first way is, if you trust God, then take your hands off the wheel. Have you ever seen 2 people driving the same car at the same time with both of their hands on the wheel? Probably not. Why? Because they'd probably get pulled over or worse, crash. Let's have an example, shall we? Teslas are self-driving cars, right? And some people are completely comfortable with taking a nap behind the wheel, while others might be comfortable having their hands hovering it, just in case. When we say, "Jesus, take the wheel," we shouldn't just say that. We should actually let him do it, right? Because it's like, okay, Jesus, I'm surrendering all this to you. Take the wheel. I want you to take control of my life. And Jesus is like, okay, but you still have your hand on the wheel. I need you to let go in order for me to steer it. And going back to that example, if 2 people are trying to drive a car at the same time, that's probably not going to end well. In order to trust God, we have to actually step back and let him do it. We have to stop trying to control the outcome so much. And I think that is also something that I'm learning, something that a lot of us are learning, I think. When it comes to trusting God, we say we do, but it's actually hard to relinquish control of our lives. Let's be honest, it could be a scary thing to not know what's next, to only see potentially the next few steps and not the whole picture. And so sometimes we just have to take a nap behind the wheel. That doesn't mean we're not an active participant in our journey, but that just means we have that much faith in God that we're okay with wherever he's taking us. We have to actually live out walking by faith and not by sight. So that's the first thing. If you trust God, take your hand off the wheel. Number 2, we have to stop changing the terms. Have you ever signed a contract and there were a certain set of terms that both parties had to agree to? In regards to not changing the terms, right? We often say, God, if this happens, I'll take it as a sign for this. But if this happens, I'll take it as a sign for that. But when the sign for what we don't want comes, we say, oh, maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe that was just happenstance. It doesn't mean anything. God, I need another sign, right? And so we essentially changed the terms of our agreement. And God is so merciful because he doesn't have to play along with us. He doesn't have to go along with our childish things. He can show us any sign he wants to. He can speak to us however he wants to. But he does often play along with us and give us the signs we ask for. But we can't go back on our word or try to lie to ourselves and pretend like the sign he gave us means something else. So if we trust God and the sign is for something we don't necessarily want, we have to understand that that's probably what's best. Even if it's not our idea of what's best, God knows. Because all things work together for the good of those who love the Lord. And if we really believe that, then we'll accept the terms, sign the contract, and move on. The third way we can actually trust God is to stop forgetting what he's done before. The disciples, as they walked with Jesus, they often forgot what he was capable of, what he's done before. When Jesus was feeding the 5,000 and the 3,000, they forgot that a few chapters before, Jesus had done the same thing. And yet they were still worried about how they were going to feed all those people. The same way in Matthew 8:26, when the disciples were on the ship in the middle of the storm, and they were frantic, they were scared. They were like, Jesus, do you not care if we live or if we die? Like, the storm is wild, man. Do something. And so Jesus woke up and he was like, calm down, wind and waves. And they were like, oh my gosh, who is this guy? The wind and the waves obey him. I probably would have been like that too, if I'm being honest. But he was like, do you still not believe? Have you not seen me perform all these other miracles? And you're still scared of a storm? I'm still here. I'm with you. I may be taking a nap, but I'm here. A lot of us have short-term memory loss when it comes to what God has done for us in the past. If we really trust God, we have to keep his power, his strength, all the things that he's done for us in the forefront of our minds, because that'll help us to continue to trust him in other situations. Okay, number 4. If we really trust God, we will obey him. John 14 verse 15 says, if you love me, keep my commandments. I wanted to talk about Numbers chapter 20, which is Moses' error at Kadesh. So essentially what was going on was the people were complaining to Moses and Aaron about how there was no water for them to drink. And so Moses and Aaron, they were appeared to by the glory of the Lord. And God told Moses to speak to the rock, and water would come out of it for the people, right? However, Moses struck the rock twice and water came out. And you may be thinking, okay, well, water came out. That's great. The people have something to drink. But the problem is Moses disobeyed God. He was not supposed to strike the rock. He was only supposed to speak to it. And by speaking to it, that would have given God the glory instead of him. So then in verse 12 it says, then the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, because you did not believe me, to hallow my name in the eyes of the children of Israel. Therefore, you shall not bring this assembly into the land which I have given them. So Moses' lack of trust in God is essentially what made him disobey. It's really interesting because this passage shows us that there are also consequences to not trusting God. Like I know we hear people say, oh, we should trust in God so that like we're not worrying, we're not wondering what's next. I mean, it's okay to wonder, but like to not stress about that. We should also trust God because there are consequences to not trusting him. And it's not necessarily punishment all the time. It's just the consequences of our action. It's just like in the garden. I'm gonna deviate from my notes here for a little bit, but it's just like in the Garden of Eden, right? God told Adam and Eve not to eat from the forbidden tree, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Because they did not trust God, at the core, a serpent was able to eat away at their faith and make them question what God had told them. The serpent was like, oh, did God really say that? Did he really say you would die? Yes, he did, okay? And so, yes, in that instance, it was punishment that occurred as a result of their disobedience. But like God literally told us not to, and it's for our own good. So it's not like he's just sitting here waiting for us to slip up so he can deal out punishment. That's not what it's about. He's literally telling us what to do, what not to do, because he knows it's not good for us anyway. If we trust God, then we will obey what he says. We will remember what he says. The Bible says we should meditate on his word day and night. If you trust your teacher, if you trust your parents, and they tell you to do something, you will most likely do it because you know they don't mean you any ill will. You know they only want the best for you. And so that same obedience, that same respect, we should give that to God. Number 5, if we trust God, then we will keep our eyes on him. When Peter was walking on the water towards Jesus, after the disciples thought Jesus was a ghost, right? His faith faltered for a second because he looked at the storm and began to sink. A lot of us are like Peter. We tend to focus on the storm. And Jesus said to him, Peter, why did you doubt? And in the same way, he's telling us, why are we doubting? We can't pay attention to what the storm, to what the circumstances look like. And yes, that's easier said than done, because sometimes life be lifing. Things really start getting serious. Things get real. And it's hard sometimes, but we have to keep our eyes on Jesus. The second Peter took his eyes off of Jesus is the second he started to sink. Sometimes in life, the math isn't mathing. But remember, even though the world says that 2 + 2 = 4, God can make 2 + 2 equal to anything. Going back to the example of how Jesus fed the 5,000 and the 3,000 with 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread, the circumstances were looking pretty grim, I would say, right? But Jesus wanted his disciples to focus on him and not the circumstances, to remember who he was, what he has done, and not the amount of people they had to feed versus the amount of food they had. And that reminds me of Matthew 6:33, and even like what's right before that. Seek ye first the kingdom and all of its righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. And I forget what specific verse it starts at, but I know it talks about how, like, why should we worry about what we will eat, what we will wear, when even the birds, even the flowers of the field, they're clothed, they have enough food. And so if they're not worried about it, if they are taken care of, then how much more will God take care of us? And I want to end with this. I heard somewhere that worrying is actually prideful because we think there's something we can do to fix the situation on our own. And I was just like, wow. And I'm so glad that I've gotten so much better at that, because if it's something that I know that I can't fix, I don't have any control over the outcome, then I'm literally wasting time and energy. That time and energy could be put somewhere else doing something productive. So we talked about, if you trust God, take your hand off the wheel. Stop changing the terms. Don't forget what he's done before. If you trust God, then obey him. And if you trust God, keep your eyes on him. And that there are also consequences to not trusting him. If you found this video helpful at all, let me know if you resonated with anything I said in this video. I love hearing from you guys. I hope this helped you in your journey towards learning to trust God more. These are things that have definitely helped me. Whatever I share with you guys are things that I've actually started implementing myself. So I'm not just saying this to tell you. I'm actually doing this myself. So I hope it helped. Don't forget to subscribe so we can continue growing in the faith together. I hope you have a blessed day, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.